Hello, everybody. This is Signals and Inside the Podcast. I am Gabriel Velez, CEO of Crowd Answers. This is the show where we sit down with people shaping how businesses grow, communicate, and make smarter decisions. My guest today is Andy Young, founder of Treeline Press, an independent research and media platform covering one of the biggest quiet transformation in business. How companies in regulated industries move from print and mail to digital. Andy grew up in his father's print shop, helped commercialize the PDF in its earliest days, spent years inside the biggest names in the industry, and then walk away to build something with, on his word, no agenda and no spin. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's great to be here with you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you and your audience.
That's perfect. Let's talk a little bit about, your story, your background. You started working in your father print shop when you were 9 years old.
Yeah,
Take me
yeah.
back to that. How did that shape the way you see this whole industry today?
Well, honestly, I think it has everything to do with it, to be honest. But it's interesting. I've taken a very, I guess, less trodden path to where I am today, for sure. Having grown up in a family printing business, and it wasn't just any kind of printing business. It was called a reprographics company, and reprographics is commonly called blueprinting. So we had a really very nichey business that we worked in. And one of our clients was Taliesin, the Frank Lloyd Wright Architecture School in Spring Green, Wisconsin. We had all the biggest architectural construction engineering firms in southern Wisconsin were clients, and so that was a really interesting time when things were still all manual. I mean, drawings were done by hand, right? It was all there was no computer aided drafting. So my dad was a draftsman, and he decided he wanted to start this blueprint company because there was a need in the market, and that exposed me as a young child to going to big industry events like Graph Expo, which, if you know the history of printing in Chicago and you know the McCormick Place, I mean, the McCormick Place was built to house that show primarily years ago. Massive, massive, massive show. Doesn't exist anymore. And it's so I've seen this industry evolve, and I decided at one point after high school that I had my own ideas about things, and I wanted to get away from my parents' printing company, and start my own company. And it turns out I wound up starting a PDF service bureau. We were doing basically service bureau and integration work for Adobe Acrobat. So this is back when a PDF file was sort of magical, and people didn't know much about it. And so I got really involved really early on as an evangelist, helping Adobe promote Acrobat, build a development community, integration community. And if you are
And
all
how you
familiar with the
did
PD,
money with that? I mean, what was the business model for
so it
that?
was if-
I'm just
so it
curious.
was it was two parts. It was selling basically tools and software solutions that's integrators were building around the world. We kind of became a collection spot as a reseller for those. But then we also had a service bureau, and so it was largely turning paper into something digital, right? So it was a rudimentary OCR kind of process, but it was the whole idea of putting paper on a CD-ROM, right? And then
Okay.
paper on the internet.
Page by page.
Yep, page by page, exactly. So that was a really interesting time, but it also, my parents were in effectively the print on demand industry. And when we started to see things like CD-ROMs and PDF files and Adobe Acrobat and the internet, we didn't need as much print anymore. And so there was a very dramatic decline in print volume in the sort of early 90s when all of these new technologies came to the surface that we used to print. You used to get everything in books, right? People would have shelves full of printed matter, right? Three-ring binders full of impressive information. That's how we moved information around. We couldn't really envision anything else. But that changed very quickly in a matter of years. And my parents got caught up in that transformation and never caught up. And in some ways, I see a lot of that echoes of that shift in today's market, in today's customer communications market, of sort of the way we kind of talked about the industry, the language we use to describe it, and sort of the pressures that sort of ultimately transformed an industry. And it's it's been an interesting ride. In between there, between working with my own company with PDF, that company was sold to a company called Icon Office Solutions, which some people may remember back in the day. And I was there in a corporate role for about 8 years. In fact, my senior manager, Barb Pello, was the VP of Icon at the time. She's going to be my next podcast guest. So I'm really excited to reminisce with her and spend time with her. She was a VP at Xerox for a long time and then the VP at Icon. But somewhere in the middle of all that, I decided I want to do something totally different. So I went and did a startup in the music industry. And well, I'd say I will classify that as a spectacular failure from which I have learned an enormous amount of wisdom from.
This is where we
So
learn the most, right?
yeah, failure really is a brutal teacher. But I, along with literally many thousands of music industry startups at the time that were trying to do stuff. This is in the age of like Napster and Yahoo Music, and I don't think Spotify was even
Line,
envisioned yet. Yep,
wire.
yep, all these different, and so that didn't work out. So I wound up going back to Icon, which at the time was acquired by Ricoh. Ricoh people, Ricoh Japan, Ricoh fax machines, Ricoh copiers, printers. And so I went back there as in a global product role. So I kind of shifted between small startup, family owned business, big company, big corporation, global Japanese company. I had some things happen in my life that caused me to rethink things. So I left Ricoh and went to an analyst firm, spent a number of years there. And then one day just decided I want to do my own thing. And it was really through the encouraging of a couple of early customers, but which I was fortunate to have. But I've always had this sort of, even when I was a kid, standing in my parents' print shop and we'd be standing behind a press or a binder machine. I mean, all you had to do was think about how the heck can I make this job better, right? Make this job
Yeah,
easier.
this
And
entrepreneurship
so
spirit.
your brain is going and it's never turned off. And, and so I
And
really
which
enjoy this.
year? Yeah,
uh,
Andy,
Which
which year you started Trillian Press?
I started Treeline research it'll be 3 years in August, 3 years
Okay.
next month. And I did start it as a research firm, right? The traditional, we're going to go, do a body of work, do some study, do some, qualitative, quantitative research, kind of, get the temperature of the market and then sell that on a subscription basis, sort of that classic,
Hmm.
market research model. And I found out pretty quickly this is not going to work. And
Okay.
I was early, I had a couple of early opportunities, but I decided this industry, and what I will get into that because we haven't really described my industry, which is customer communications, we have enough analysts, right? We have enough analyst firms that are looking at doing the surveys of the end users and the big vertical markets and trying to collect sentiment and make sense out of it. We've got enough of that. What we're missing is a media and marketing and communications platform for the industry to have a conversation. It doesn't really exist. Maybe on LinkedIn, right? Maybe a few people that follow me on Substack, but we found that this industry is really just lacking representation. And so one of the things that I was really excited about on coming on your podcast was really seeing myself as a representative of what I call the customer communications industry. And I believe this industry is just getting ready to see its own in terms of taking its place in the enterprise stack of importance and relevance to things like customer experience and initiatives with artificial intelligence. And so I'm really excited to be sort of out kind of delivering that message about an industry that most people would say, "Oh, you mean at the end of the month and we got to send Gabriel a statement, we send some data downstairs and somebody does something with it and they print it and they put it in the mail." That's how most people think of customer communications. It's actually a whole lot more than that. And it also operates in a very typically in highly regulated industries, financial services, banking, healthcare, et cetera.
Healthcare. Hmm.
So, people say, well, can't Salesforce, issue a letter and send an email? Yes, it can. But the moat that the CCM industry has is years and years of experience of managing data and compliance and integrity. There's an interesting story about when I was at Rico, I had a client and on their wall in their production facility, they had this giant sign and it said, 99% correct is 100% wrong. If you get the wrong information in the wrong envelope or you violate some HIPAA compliance or other, it's bad news. And
Yeah,
you are in the news for that and it can destroy your business. And
it's
so the
painful.
CCM industry's grown up sort of with this tension of it's got to be right every time. And so that then rolls over to documents of record and statements of record and customer data. And so there's all kinds of things attached to that process that the enterprise is looking at and going, these guys that send Gabriel a bill every month, they actually know a lot about him. Number one, because they hold an archive of everything he's ever purchased from us, say it's a credit card, right? But you are also one of the only touch points that we have with Gabriel on a regular basis is the bill we send him. And so the recognition of that sort of required communication channel is really starting to get recognition. It's particularly in the MarTech and customer experience level in the enterprise that are saying, yeah, this is actually a big part of the journey. Part of the whole overall experience orchestration involves this stuff that we used to kind of just say, oh, it happens downstairs in the basement, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's
So
like a kind of business that basically works silently, and basically you get the assumption that should work well. That only when it's not working well is when you realize, wow, how important it is, right?
yeah,
How
yeah,
relevant it is that
yeah,
I receive my invoice or my statement on time.
yeah,
And
yep.
yeah, yeah,
People just don't think about it because it generally works. And
uh huh.
the big shift has been, at least in the US, this is different in different markets around the world, but at least in the US, we're getting fewer and fewer of those sort of kind of regular bills and statements in our physical mailbox. Most of them are appearing somewhere else, email, mobile
Opt
apps, those
out.
kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
you
yeah.
receive through your email or
And
statement. Yeah.
so you've seen my TEDx talk about the US Postal Service. And, as we start to rely less and less on the mail for some of that regular kind of expected stuff, the mail just becomes a big advertising channel. And I think that's going to be a problem eventually. So I could get into a whole reason why I think that is, but I'll just put it this way. I think it's just a matter of time before a politician picks up this issue and says, we're going to do something about this. So it's
Yeah, I
because I
live
think
in
it's perceived
Miami.
as
In
very
Miami, I
wasteful.
used to live in Miami Beach, a very like a political area. Then we receive a ton of, I will say like a 50% were like a political driven,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yep. Oh, for sure. For
materials.
sure. But
Yeah,
so anyways, it's a really fun industry. People ask me, Andy, why are you so passionate about this? And the best answer that I can give is in part it is because it's something I've observed my entire life. It's kind of how I think about things. But I just feel really blessed to feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I can't answer it any differently than that. So I'm having fun. And but it is, as my father-in-law would say, go find your niche. And it's pretty nichey. So
that's cool, and it's very very nice to talk with you because you're an expert on this field. And always curious about the future of mailing. Let's talk about it. Um,
yeah,
sounds like from one perspective we are analyzing slow decline, right? Like a USPS volume is down about half from its peak, but on
yeah,
on the other end is also like an uptick on new kinds of communication or new opportunities. What
yeah.
what areas do you see here that could basically improve or grow in the next few years from your perspective?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's fascinating because the U.S. in many ways is a bubble. It's by far the biggest and most important customer communications marketplace in the world, right? Let's call it 70% or more of the market. And just to sort of illustrate that, the U.S. population is about 4.5% of the global population, but yet we produce 50% or more of the global mail volume is in the United States.
We're
So it
pretty
just gives you some,
noisy.
Right.
Like as
Yeah.
a society, we like to be in the show, right?
Right, yeah,
So,
yeah. So it just gives you a sense of scope and scale of how big this industry is. In fact, in my TED talk, again, just referencing that, in 2023, the U.S. mailing industry was valued or was estimated to produce about $1.9 trillion in economic activity. That's massive. People never think about it, right? They never think about what's going on behind the scenes. And it also means that every mailbox that just on average, if you take that amount of revenue and you divide it by the number of physical mailboxes are out there, that means every mailbox is worth something like $10,000. So there's a big economic incentive to keep things the way they are. But in my practice, we tend to sort of break this bucket of customer communications down into two parts. We have what I'll call transactional mail, direct marketing mail, advertising mail. It's kind of that solicitation engagement side of the customer journey, right? It's about selling. It's about getting market share and
leads
wallet share and
or
all that, right? The other
sales. Yeah.
side is the side that says you're a bank. There are certain things that you have to send every month for every kind of notice or change or whatever it looks like. The regulations say you got to tell
Compliance.
Gabriel it's compliance, right? So it's driven largely by the notion of what is compliant. And as an industry overall, I'd say let's talk financial services. If we think about how a bank or an insurance company communicates with its customers, it's about 70 digital adoption sort of overall across the market. And there are multiple firms that sort of confirm that that's kind of where we are. But I think that that number can improve somewhere closer to 90% over time. But we're stuck sort of in this bubble largely because, and you brought it up, compliance. And up until now, the way regulations were written in many of these industries, it said written communication, written document. It never said how it had to be delivered. But because it didn't say how it had to be delivered, there's ambiguity. And so the industry has just said, we don't know. We don't want to test it. We don't want to push it. But that's changing. There's been some legislation proposed, a number of different acts in this area around how to start moving to more digital communications by default in these certain vertical industries, banking, financial services, et cetera. And that legislation has been very slow to move. Even at the same time, we've got a postal service that's struggling to figure out its path and where it's going with its future. But 2 weeks ago, the Postal Service announced an increase in the price of a stamp, 12th that it started. And that same week, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, said, you know what, we're tired of waiting for the lawmakers to fix this. We are going to propose a new SEC rule, which we can do. And they're going to open that rule up for comment. And it's basically going to say that all SEC communications can be defaulted to digital first, all of
Wow.
them. And if you want to come back in, then you can opt back in for print. And there's some restrictions now that you can't charge for that. They have to make it available. I'm all for that. But what it's going to do is there's a term in the industry called double dippers. And these are consumers that get their statements and things in their mail from, say, their bank, but they also use the mobile app to check their balance and make their payments and, have any inquiries or anything. Everything's done on their mobile app. So they've got these customers that are receiving the paper for really no reason, just because they are. And then you've got a group that does all of that stuff on their phones. That group of people that are getting both communications, those double dippers, that's going to be the first chunk of volume that's going to drop out of the system, because now you don't have to say, oh, will you please opt out? Regulations are going to say you can opt Gabriel out. You can basically force him over to digital and then he can opt back in. And I think once that falls, then you're going to get other regulated vertical industries are going to fall in line. And it's just going to follow a pattern that we've seen elsewhere in the world, primarily Europe, where you're going to start seeing consolidation in the marketplace. You're going to start seeing the print volume, the volume that was printed and mailed, is going to consolidate and coalesce around a small number of very large vendors because they have the efficiency to do it. It's a beautiful value add to the other things that they're doing. So anyways, long story short, we are looking at the UK market for the last 10 years to try and understand what were some of the factors that you were asking about. It is compliance, and regulations. It's
You
consumer
mentioned that
behavior
in
changes.
our last call, right? Because we see UK like an advanced society because they started the mail and they had been advanced more than the US, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah,
are,
for sure.
yeah.
And so there it's very different. And so the rest of the world kind of looks at the US. Again, we're in this bubble and and that is starting to change. And I think the first big kink in the armor is going to be if this SEC rule comes down, because you understand if the market consolidates, that means less need for more hardware, software, professional services. It has reduced mail volume. It all just is going to be a cycle, right? That is going to just continue to compress the industry. Meanwhile, there's a lot of communications haven't gone away. In fact, they've increased. And so the question that I always say to my colleagues in the industry when we talk about printed and mailed communications, particularly transactional, is the question is not that print is ever going to go away. It's not. It's always going to have a need. It's always going to be a special channel. The question, though, is how many organizations are we going to need to serve the market that's left? And that is a really tough question to answer. But we can go and look in the UK and see what happened there in terms of how that market consolidated over the last 10 to 15 years. And it's a pretty, I believe, we're just digging into it, but it's going to be a pretty interesting story that brings into, it's all of those things, right? There's just environmental factors are a much bigger deal in Europe than they are, for example, in the United States. We talk about it, but it's not sort of, it just doesn't feel like it's sort of front of mind, right? It's sort of like if we can squeeze it in, we'll do it. But it's in Europe, it's sort of
Yeah, it's not
mandatory.
regulation, strong regulation
Right,
against
right.
that.
It's sort
So
of
you can
right. So
certainly,
there's
yeah.
all those things. There's factors that sort of come into play that took this market and compressed it. And I see, things like that occurring in the US. And I know we didn't talk about it, I think previously, but the big fuel in the tank and part of the industry that I'm really fascinated with is the capital markets, right? Private equity and investment and what it's doing on the back end to sort of push this industry. Cause people ask me, where are we going? I say, well, I'm going to be a flippant
Look,
answer, but I just follow the money. Just
follow
follow
the
the money.
money. Where
Just
these
see where the money is going. And
people are investing, right? And maybe they are investing. What your take? Basically, less companies,
well, I
specialities, or yeah,
yeah, I
specializations.
think it's really interesting that anything, unfortunately, anything that's sort of remotely related to print, like documentation and even the CCM industry, I think to some degree is sort of put into this bucket of paper and mail. And I think there's a lot of private equity firms out there that are like, it's a growth market only through consolidation. So if you're not funding a company to just continue to get bigger, it's not something where I think you're going to just organically get more volume because the market is shrinking. I mean, all you have to do is look at mail volume and know that that's true. So the market is not getting bigger, but at the same time, there's a small number of service providers that are getting bigger in this.
Yeah. So you should invest in those basically like a winners, right?
Right. And the money is, I think a lot of the money though is going to be still going into the technology, the AI and all of that stuff. But we had a company in our space that about this time last year was acquired, and they got a I've never actually seen it validated, but it was about a $1.8 billion valuation. And that was a really big deal for our space. Cause it really, but then when you read the press release and you understand sort of the value proposition and use case for that acquisition, you start to understand it's all about the future. It's all about digital communications and interactions and, digital infrastructure and customer experience. It's not about print manufacturing. And so the money is kind of gravitating in a new direction. And I think that could have a really, again, sort of like the SEC rules, it's going to have a ripple effect across the industry. And I know for a fact that there are companies out there that are still in their holding period from pre-COVID, right? Assumptions were made ahead of COVID about how the world was going to operate. And then COVID came and we went, oops, that changed. Right? And so a
Accelerate
lot of assumptions
everything.
were made that now they're like, yeah, I don't know. We've been sitting on this thing for 7, 8, 9 years and we're not seeing it. And that, unfortunately, I think that bell's going to get rung fairly soon. So we'll have to see how it unwinds. But again, these markets, the US, when you go to Europe, it has sort of a different feel to it again. And so it's sort of I'm really fascinated in this study of the UK because I see it as an opportunity to really set a benchmark to say, kind of, here's where the UK is. Now, here's, let's say how far behind the US is in certain markets or applications, right? And then also use that to say, well, let's go to New Zealand or let's go to Malaysia or India and see how far ahead they are in many ways on a lot of things. So it becomes kind of a benchmark to understand, we're the industry's sort of, I think, coming around, or at least a lot of the people are recognizing that this industry is all about a digital AI driven data future. It's print is going to have a component, but it's just going to be a component. It's no longer the core or the center or the thing that's driving the industry. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch. And what I'm trying to do with Treeline Press is really provide that sort of a view into that so that organizations sort of see themselves on that continuum of transformation, but also hear the success stories because it is not all doom and gloom. In fact, it's actually really exciting. Like I said, when I started, I see this industry as expansive and forward looking, and its role in the enterprise is only going to increase in importance. So I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity in the market for growth and revenue, but it's going to look really different than it used to. And
Yeah.
there's companies out there doing that work, and I'm hoping to sort of surface that and tell those stories because I think it's really
Yeah.
important that people understand what's happening.
And it's very interesting to hear from you how those examples will look like, because in your TEDx talk, ask why we still need US mail in a digital world, right? So interested to know what's the answer most people miss, and how brands could leverage that opportunity in the best way.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. And the thing that's really fascinating, the way I'm going to frame this, and I'll get to it in a roundabout way, but oftentimes you'll hear me talk about how the printing industry does not have a value problem; it has a volume problem, right? So a lot of the industry is really focused on the value of print, improving the experience, embellishments, better data targeting and cleansing. All of that is great and good. The problem with that is it creates leakage in volume and it compresses volume and it will continue to compress volume. And it's the volume that keeps this whole ecosystem afloat. And so we're really trying to help, you know, tell that story. But I want to get back to your question about the TEDx, and I'm going to ask you to remind me because I just lost it for a second on your question about my TED talk.
Yeah, so basically it's related why we still need the US mail in a digital
Yeah,
world.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, sorry, I got off on a tangent. No, absolutely. We need the mail for a host of reasons. I think artificial intelligence is one of them. I think as a society, authenticity is going to continue to be a tremendous challenge for us, and proving identity, proving that you're a real person, that you exist in a physical space and you live in a physical spot. I think all of that is going to only continue to increase in importance. Not that it was never important before, but I think organizations now, because of AI, are starting to say, "Hey, this data it needs to be organized and accurate and up to date," and because this stuff it's our business. So I think that the mail is always going to have a role, but I think and I think the challenge is going to be: is it going to be every day? Is it going to be just a few days a week? And I think as we lose more and more of that transactional sort of monthly expected sort of stuff to digital, what's left in our mailboxes, I fear, if it's not medicine or, something important like a election ballot or something, uh, I I just wonder how long consumers are going to sort of tolerate it just becoming a collection spot for advertising. I don't know. It's very effective, and that's part of the problem. Direct mail advertising does work. It just kind of leaves a big waste stream behind it, which is really too.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes they get like at this saturation, right, level. But at the same time, you have these people other homes, and it's more maybe you can tell me about creativity, right? About how you engage them, what they bring, it like ideas to be more innovative in a way, right?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also related, and you can tell me more about integrations between AI and digital and mailing, right? Even
Yeah.
virtual reality, and
Yeah. Yeah.
how you think they're gonna happen. Do you think all brands are ready for that? Maybe no.
Yeah, I don't know, and I tend to really keep my focus on that transactional side, the regulated side, and I think that's where we're gonna see there's a tremendous amount of excitement in AI in that regard, but I think it's also some hesitancy, you know, the lack of 100% certainty about a result, an outcome that comes out of AI, I think is concerning, so I think the industry's trying to just figure out kind of where are these pieces going to fit where it's not going to put my business at risk or my customers at risk. So it's agents watching agents and those types of things. I see AI perhaps less about manipulating customer data and more about managing the process. Is that kind of a fair assessment? But um, you know i I have a I have somewhat of I don't want to say skeptical, maybe that's the wrong word. I just think we're sort of hitting a reality wall with AI in a lot of ways. I think the industry I think we kind of got ahead of our skis, as we say here in Colorado. And I think there's just a lot of catching up to do across the enterprise for things to actually start, delivering some value. But I think for somebody like myself, I use it all the time. And most of the people I suspect you do as well. And so from an individual user's perspective, I think AI has been amazing. And you gotta be careful. I mean, now LinkedIn and Substack both have AI filters so you can report somebody for posting AI slop. I don't know if you saw that, but, so I think that's gonna make posting it's gonna change the content a little bit on social media, perhaps. But I don't think people are gonna stop using AI because of that. They're gonna use it for research. They're gonna do it for all kinds of other things. So, I'm super excited. It's part of what makes I believe this industry so dynamic and so interesting is it's being sort of driven in the background by AI. For businesses to sort of align their data and their infrastructure and, collecting the right data about customers and having the right context is something that the CCM industry has done for a long, long time. And I think AI is going to unlock a lot of value that's been built in that space over, decades. So it's going to be fun to watch, but I think in terms of, the actual print output, one of the things that's interesting, I had a industry colleague say something about sort of solicit the industry to provide input on AI and print. And I did a video and I said, all goodness. I said, but the one thing I've never heard anybody say about AI in the printing industry is that it was going to increase demand. It's just there to fix what's left. It's just there to make what remains as efficient as possible. And I think that's the way the industry looks at it. So it's really fascinating to me that, we're kind of in this position where everybody's excited about AI for lots of good reasons. But I think the one thing it's not going to do is make the market bigger, is grow the market. So it's a story that's going to be interesting to evolve, and that's again why I'm studying the UK market to sort of unravel that story a little.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have been in the industry for decades, and you know that. I mean, yeah, maybe not growing in terms of numbers, but there are still opportunities, right? And at the end,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the same thing that happened with human in the loop in the AI and the virtual versus real and the
Hmm.
consumer experience. You need this physical
Yep,
touch point to a certain extent, and also all the regulation related
yep,
with that as well.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting your perspective, because it also allows to feel that you're always thinking ahead in ways how can propose. alternatives to the clients, right?
Yeah, I
So
mean, it's gotten me in trouble a
that's
few
interesting.
times too, but yeah.
Can imagine that. So, and let me ask you something. When a financial service or an insurance company reach out to Treeline Press for study, for advisory work, for implementation, which are the ones who basically are the best clients, or you feel it's good to work with you guys. You understand where you're going.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's a really great question, and hmm, I would answer it this way. Treeline Press is we are really focused on becoming a media company and a place where we can create community and conversations around this sort of broader industry that is evolving. I've certainly been hired as, an advisor and some other things, but as we move forward and as we're looking at the future of Treeline Press, it'll be much more about we've got a great story to tell. We would like someone to help us tell it. We would like someone to come and, speak at an event about the state of the industry. I might certainly do some of that. We are doing this research in the UK market, not in a traditional, market research sense, if we're going to do the work and then sell it. We're inviting sponsors to participate, and it's going to be an ongoing process that's going to take 9 months or a year to sort of do the research, tell the story, and sort of bring that to some conclusion next spring is the plan. So, and we're using that framework of that study then to sort of inform sort of our content calendar and the kind of the flavor we want to give our podcasts. And so it's sort of going to drive the business, this idea of what I call digital transformation through the lens of customer communication. So it's really a story of digital transformation of a marketplace. We're just using what's happened with print and mail as a way to sort of describe that, because I think it's something that everybody's familiar with. Everybody knows about the mail, right? So that will drive, we believe more, engagements of a, speaking narrative kind of storytelling kind of perspective rather than, hey, come in and help us integrate X, Y to Z. Like I said, I don't think we need more analysts. In fact, I know most of them. I would like to call them friends, and I'm here to sort of help. I want to help even those firms surface where are they focusing their effort and where do they say change in this market, and what is the thing that we could sort of elevate about what they're doing in their research. I've got two guys from a research firm in India called QKS Group that'll be on. I think that podcast will be in about 2 weeks. And it was they're just one of other firms that are kind of traditional analyst firms in this space that are all doing some amazing stuff. And I'm hearing from customers that are saying, we don't need any more of that. What we need is somebody that has an opinion. And I'd say that I definitely have a point of view, right? I feel like I my point of view is that I see this market as expansive and forward-looking and transformative. I don't see focusing on the way we did things 20 years ago as I'm not saying it's not important, but that's my point of view is somewhere else. If you want that, there's plenty of places to get it here in the U.S. So I'm trying to bring that, create a media presence, perhaps through a actual published magazine, perhaps through in-person events in the future, but be a place where the industry can have a conversation, because it doesn't exist. There are no events in the United States that focus on the customer communications industry anymore. I mean, Gartner used to cover it, Forrester used to cover it. And so the market is sort of transformed, and so it's not what it used to be. And we want to create a media and publishing environment that sort of reflects that new industry, that new change, that sort of forward-looking view for what I call future CCM, future customer communications. Because I don't want, to be honest, I don't want to create another three-letter acronym that just we don't need anymore. So
What is that? Yeah. No,
yeah.
that's
So
that's great, because I imagine that reflection allows you to get good good conversations, and also potentially to get in contact with the clients as well, right?
yeah,
and
yeah. I
and
mean,
and it
it's yeah,
and
for
it's a
sure.
lateral way in order to find out their problems and talk about potential solutions.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's basically is more, calic is more profound, is more rich that just,
Yep.
hey,
Yeah.
this is the cost of 1,000 emails or 1
Yeah.
million.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
So we want to be that environment where people can learn, people can share, people can see themselves in this story of transformation and sort of where, because again, I think there's a certain segment of this market that's in the United States that's there, a lot of family owned first, second generation firms that are in the print and mail business. They're going to have to make some hard decisions and in the coming years. And I want to be able to say there are options here. There are new ways to be thinking about, where you can make money in your business. So it's it's going to be a real interesting transformation. But as far as the big enterprise end users, absolutely. I want them to be exposed to technology and sort of thinking around AI. I've got a friend of mine that's actually running an AI incubator in the space where they're doing basically it's something a traditional analyst firm, which would have been benchmarking, right? So they're taking these AI tools that are being developed in this industry and applying some standards to measure them. It's going to be interesting to watch that because that seems like a moving target to me. But so there's a lot of fun stuff going on. And so, our model is really more shifting from, that sort of advisory hourly retainer to more of a sponsorship, media advertising model.
that makes sense. And on that, you bet on the independent reader supported model at a moment when
Mhm.
Substack and solo analysts are exploding.
Yeah.
So where
Yeah.
do you see Treeline Press and this whole independent analysis movement in 2 to 3 years? Where do you see it?
I think this is the future. And I've actually had clients say to me, they're like, oh my gosh, we really need somebody that's a influencer. I think might have been the term that would have been right in history, but I think it's more storyteller or interpreter or whatever you want to call it. But I think it's where we're going. And part of it is, frankly, there's a whole lot of folks that are my age that are, have exited sort of the regular work world and are now sort of finding themselves independent. And I've talked to a whole lot of really brilliant people in the last couple of weeks that really have some expertise on various aspects of this industry. And so I think there's going to be sort of this shift, this reorganization of maybe where knowledge is going to sit in this industry. I don't know, but I'd certainly like to be a part of that and give people an outlet to share their views. I just spoke to someone this morning, and I have a page on my Substack that's called Perspectives, and it is a guest page. And my promise to them is I will publish whatever you give me. I will not edit it. I will put it up there. I mean, as long as it's not, offensive and inappropriate, these are your words. I'm going to publish them as is. And I've got some people finally taking me up on that because they're like, I got something to say, but I have nowhere to say it. And so we want to, I think there's going to be, the Substack is really sort of where my content lives. And then I've got a traditional website, which is, more the business and the branding and how to engage with, what I do. And then, of course, we have LinkedIn. YouTube is probably our fastest growing channel right now. And then our email, we're working really hard on our email list. I think we had a great response. I mean, we're getting north of 50% open rate and 34% click through rate on our emails. So, we're very targeted, very
Wow.
specialized, reaching a certain group of people. So, but I think, it's all about video. It's, of course, the podcasts. I think people are just looking for, they're looking to learn and looking for some perspective. They just sort of want to give it to them maybe in smaller bite sized chunks or in a way they can understand that doesn't necessarily require, sitting down and studying something for half an hour. So there's a lot to be said in that I'm again just really excited about this broader story and how we can sort of piece that together in a way that the industry can navigate in a way that's meaningful. Like, if you're asking me my goal, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I usually ask that question at the end. What part of this work that makes you
Well, I
want
answered
to
it
keep
first, but yeah.
publishing and talking every day and wake you up and basically you responded already. So it's of the communication and the connection part, right? So yeah,
And
it's
I think in
basically
person is coming back, but I
I
think it's
think
really
so as
intentional. I
well.
think it's really intentional though. And so you're like me, you got dozens of different events you could attend, and, so I think this is one where I think there's enough specialization that we might be able to start bringing back some in-person events to really talk about some of this stuff, so we'll see.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's gonna
yeah. We
blend
need to
into.
connect with
Yeah,
real people. It's basically makes complete difference.
absolutely.
Andy, this has been a fantastic conversation. The
Hopefully, it was,
idea
informative. Yeah, just listening to my
No,
ramblings.
yeah. I mean, I really like it. The idea that print and mail aren't dying but being reallocated to where trust and permission still matter.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can build this honest, independent voice in the industry that is full of sponsor-driven noise as well. That's
Mhm.
exactly, the things that this audience want to hear.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
I know that you are very active and you're a podcaster as well. Maybe
yeah.
successful, more successful than me, but that is great to know.
Gosh, I don't know. It's
So yeah, I started recently, but yeah, it's good that you talk with the same audience. And basically, I would like to ask you, where can people find you on Treeline Press if they want to go deeper?
Yeah, they can just go to their browser and type in treeline.press, and you will wind up on my Substack. Of course, it's Treeline Press at, Substack, and, treelinepress.com on my website, and then I also have a YouTube channel called Above the Treeline with Andy Young. That's where I post a lot of my video content,
How many
and so
episodes you have already
I have
recorded?
now I have, I think, 34 in
Okay,
the
okay, yeah,
can, and
yeah,
I think, we're gonna publish 31 next week.
that's
Um,
cool.
so, here we are thinking about, I'm thinking about expanding the business in terms of, bringing on perhaps some partners because I'm a solo operator, and so I'm running as fast as I can, and there's a lot of interesting opportunities out there, and I feel like the market, and I don't when I say the market, I don't just mean the United States, I mean globally. There's a desire for just more direction and community around this industry. So I hope we can play a part in that.
That's good. Yeah, because of someone said you can go faster if you go alone, but further if you go with a group, with a
Yep.
partner, with someone to ask you questions or support you. That's important also. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased that you're doing this too. I think it is a wave. I think we see a lot of folks kind of finding their niche and really focusing on it and doing similar things. And I think it's just great for you to be out there doing it. I mean, that was the best advice I was told, is just go do it. Just start.
Yeah.
And if I go
Yeah.
back and look at my first 10 episodes, I mean, the guests are great, but the production value is horrific, right? So, um,
Yeah, yeah, no, the same thing here. I mean, you're learning. Every day is a new day that you learn. And as long as you're enjoying the ride and having those conversations, smart answers, learning something, that's the point, right? If you let
yeah,
someone
exactly.
with a good with something about to think that he wasn't thinking yet. So that's the point here. So great. So
Well,
thank you
good.
very
Thank you very
much.
much,
And that's
Gabriel.
a wrap on this one. Huge thanks to
Mm,
Andy Young for showing that what it looks to build a genuinely independent voice, no agenda, no spin, an industry in an industry where everyone else right off are declining. And I
right.
believe that is an industry that still have a lot of things to do and
Mhm.
continue growing. Okay, if you got something of it, please subscribe, thumbs up, and yeah, looking forward to meet you in the next episode of Signals and Insight. Take care,
Right.
everybody. Okay, thank you.